Hey guys, it's Alex. I'm here with a book review for Sarah Dessen's latest novel, Once and For All. This book, like every Sarah Dessen novel, is a young adult contemporary romance. It centers on a girl named Luna, whose mother owns a wedding planning business. Her boyfriend Ethan was killed in a school shooting in September, and the story is split between September, when she met him and dated him, and the second part of the story takes place in June, as she's grieving and she meets a new boy who she might potentially want to date, and she starts to possibly move on with her life and find love again. This book disappointed me a lot. I've come to expect good things from Sarah Dessen. Not always great. I haven't absolutely adored every book she's written, but I've loved the vast majority of them, and I'd never given her books lower than 3 stars until now. I gave Once and For All 2 stars. I did not like this. When I was rating it on Goodreads, I tried to give it 3, and then I found myself, by the end of my review, I couldn't do it. I couldn't justify giving it 3 stars. If it had been any author other than Sarah Dessen, I wouldn't even considered a 3-star rating. It was just all around. I did not like this book. This is going to be a very ranty review that's basically full of all the things I did not like about it, because there was very little that I enjoyed here. But to start off with the positives of the things I enjoyed, I didn't mind the beginning. It wasn't particularly fantastic, but starting this, I was like, oh, it's a typical Sarah Dessen novel. It will make me happy. It didn't, but like the first 100 or so pages, I thought that it might. And then it just went downhill. And the other thing I liked was that Auden and Eli from Along for the Ride make a cameo, and that made me very happy. That was my favorite part of this book. And when your favorite part of a book is a cameo from characters from another book, that's a bad sign. So moving on to the more unpleasant aspects of this review. There was insta-love. There was a lot of insta-love from a lot of different characters. Her mother had insta-love, Luna had insta-love, her best friend Jilly had insta-love. I'm not sure what other characters were in this, but I'm sure they also had insta-love. It happened repeatedly. They would be all single and happy, and then they would meet a boy randomly, and then suddenly they were in intense love, and nothing could change that. They were just like madly head over heels, and it happened repeatedly, not just with the main character, because I understand that it's a romance novel. There has to be some degree of insta-love, because you can't like build an entire madly in love romance over a book without doing it kind of quickly, but this was excessive and it was painful to read, and I hated it. I also did not like Ambrose at all. He was a thoroughly unlikable person. Even after, like, you weren't supposed to like him so much in the beginning, but he was the kind of character who was supposed to grow on you, and he didn't. I didn't want him and Luna to end up together. He completely rubbed me the wrong way, and he was irritating, and he was selfish, and he was very childish and immature, and it wasn't in a ha-ha funny way. Like, in this lullaby, I'm forgetting the boy's name from this lullaby, but he was kind of immature and childish, but he also had, you know, a more thoughtful side that you just had to take time to get to know. Ambrose didn't, as far as I could tell. Like, he could be nice, I'm not saying he couldn't, but he cheated on girls. Like, he wouldn't say they were in an exclusive relationship, but he would know that they thought that and date other people, and then act like the victim in that situation. And he was late to his mother's wedding because he was flirting with a girl, and he was constantly breaking things, and he stole a dog. And I didn't like him, and when you don't like half of the romantic relationship, it's not good for a romance novel. I could have gotten over not liking him, except he and Luna had very little chemistry. I was honestly 2/3 of the way through this book, wondering if this was actually a romance novel, or if Sarah Dessen was branching out into, like, dealing with grief, and there's a boy and potentially romance, but then there's not romance, and it's not intended to be romance. And honestly, even, like, at the very end, she could have, like, thrown that in there, like, thrown it for a loop, like, oh no, they don't end up together, and it wouldn't have surprised me, because there was so little chemistry. I was honestly more surprised that there was romance between them, like, I was like, where was that this entire book? The other thing I didn't like so much, well, not so much, but the other thing that I incredibly hated about this book is a big thing and is split into multiple subsections. So we will go through them one by one. But the big thing is, this felt like a first draft. And I say this not just as a reader, but as a writer. This felt like a first draft. I would not be surprised if Sarah Dessen mentioned in, like, several years that she was 2 months behind on a deadline and just turned in her first draft of a novel that she barely worked on at all, and it somehow got published. That would not surprise me. I'd be more surprised if this wasn't a first draft or a second draft, but it was a very early draft that needed tons and tons of work. The pacing in this was so weird and off. It was really slow for the first 75% of the book, like really slow. And then the last 25% wrapped up, maybe not even 25, like the last 15% wrapped up everything really, really fast. And there was no time for development because it was all like very slow paced, very, I was wondering if there was going to be a romance, if there was going to be any action at all. Like, I could have lived if there weren't, because I don't mind slow-paced books. But in the end, everything suddenly happened at once, and it was really weird and off-putting. Also, in the this felt like a first draft vein, there were inconsistencies, like timeline inconsistencies. And just, she would say things in one chapter and then contradict herself 2 or 3 chapters later. And they weren't like huge plot altering things, but they were still inconsistencies that I noticed. At one point, Luna says she skipped class after first period the day of the shooting, the day that her boyfriend was killed. But a few chapters earlier, she'd actually gone through that day and, like, relived it. And she went to Spanish class in the morning, first thing, took a quiz, met up with Jilly after the class, and then went to art history. And then after art history, she left school. And that bothered me a lot. And another time, she's talking about wishes with Ambrose and how she doesn't believe in wishes. And she says something along the lines of, at her last birthday, she closed her eyes and blew out the candles without making a wish, because the only thing she would wish for, she couldn't get. Presumably, she's talking about her dead boyfriend being killed. Like, she can't bring him back. Like, that's the only thing I could think of that would make sense for her saying that. But her birthday is in July, and her boyfriend, like, they celebrate her birthday later on in this book, and her boyfriend died in September, and there wasn't time for her to have a birthday between September and July, unless she has 2 a year. So either that's wrong, or she was referencing a birthday before even meeting her boyfriend, and that wouldn't make sense at all. And it's little things like that. There were a couple of them that I noticed, and it bothered me so much. Like, I expect the occasional little thing like that in a massive fantasy series. Like, when you're writing, 10 books, and they're long, I sort of expect that there's going to be the occasional thing. But this is a 350-page contemporary. There is no excuse for having inconsistencies like that. Especially from an author who is as experienced and skilled as Sarah Dessen is. There is no excuse. Like, and I say this as a writer. That's the kind of thing you do in a first draft that you fix later in drafts 2 or 3 when you're going back through it. Like, not fixing those things is just lazy. No one noticing them as they go through is just completely lazy and unnecessary and shouldn't have happened. Like, that's what this whole book felt like. Like, she wrote a first draft and did not have time to revise and edit and fix anything, except for, like, obvious grammatical errors and such. Like, the characters were all underdeveloped, the relationship was underdeveloped. Lots of things didn't really make sense, the pacing was off, there were all these inconsistencies, and the worst part of it was, the premise was pretty good. Like, the beginning started out like a typical Sarah Dessen novel, and the premise wasn't bad. Like, I could see myself really enjoying this book. You know, 2 or 3 revisions down the line after she fixed everything and evened out the pacing and, you know, did a better job with the characters. I could really see myself enjoying this. And that's horrible because I shouldn't be able to say that. Like, this could have been a typical Sarah Dessen novel for me. Like, I could have given it 4 stars and really enjoyed it and been perfectly happy to reread it again in 2 or 3 years. But it wasn't. It was bad. I disliked this. This is the first Sarah Dessen novel I've ever disliked. And I hate that I thought this was going to be like my favorite book of the month, or at least like a good book. And it's possibly my least favorite of the month so far, and it's the biggest disappointment I've had all year, I think, because I was really looking forward to it. But I gave this 2 stars. If it intrigues you, I would suggest reading literally anything else by Sarah Dessen, because I love all her other books. They're all good. This was not. I was so disappointed. I was so disappointed. I can't get over how disappointed this book made me. I kept waiting for, like, that spark of goodness to come through, and it never did. And I sigh, because I wanted to love this so much, and I didn't. Vaguely ranty review over. I say vaguely ranty, because that makes me feel like I didn't just rant about a Sarah Dessen novel, because I love Sarah Dessen, and that makes me sad. I have, like, 6 of her books on my shelf behind me somewhere. I really do love her. This book was just so disappointing and so below what she usually writes. But let me know down below if you read this, what you thought of this, and if you liked it, why you liked it. Because I would really be interested to know. I don't mean to, like, insult anyone who did enjoy this book, because people have different tastes, and it's just, to me, this was not a book that I enjoyed or liked in any capacity. Other than Eli and Auden making a cameo. I loved Eli and Auden. This book made me want to read along for the ride instead of once and for all. Bye, guys!